In Turkey, all eyes are on Putin, a pipeline and politics, but don't overlook the problems. It's all handshakes and smiles in Istanbul, but there's still tension over the wars in Syria and Libya. Can the two presidents find enough common ground to end the fighting? I'm Adnan Nawaz, and today's newsmaker is Turkey's relationship with Russia. Hello again. Realpolitik can be a controversial word in international relations. It means having to compromise and make decisions based not always on principles, but on practicalities. It means having to deal with countries who may not seem like natural allies and work towards a common goal with often differing strategies. Here in Istanbul, Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin have been opening a new gas pipeline that should benefit both nations. But behind closed doors, the conversations will have been more about their positions on Syria and Libya. Turkey and Russia play significant roles in those conflicts, but they are on completely opposite sides. Adam Pletz reports.
President Vladimir Putin is in Turkey for the inauguration of the TurkStream pipeline, which will deliver Russian natural gas to Turkey and southern Europe. The project, together with the sale of the Russian S-400 missile defense system to Turkey, has helped to secure the country's relationship. Diplomatically, Ankara and Moscow are cooperating closely, but differences persist in their visions for the Middle East and North Africa.
Хочу выразить надежду на то, что тот уровень российско-турецких отношений, который достигнут за последнее время, он сыграет свою роль в урегулировании всех вопросов сложных, которые в регионе сложились на сегодняшний день.
In the Libyan conflict, Turkey supports the UN-recognized Government of National Accord in Tripoli, while Russia backs warlord Khalifa Haftar.
Çeşitli Avrupa ve Arap ülkeleri tarafından desteklenen darbeci generale karşı mücadele yürüten Trablus yönetimine her türlü desteği verdik, veriyoruz ve vereceğiz.
Turkey's parliament authorized a troop deployment to Libya in support of the government in Tripoli. Such an operation could pit Turkish forces against reported Russian mercenaries on Haftar's side. In Syria too, Ankara and Moscow are on opposite sides of the war. Turkey supports opposition forces, while Russia has thrown its military weight behind Bashar al-Assad's regime. Moscow's intervention started in 2015 and has changed the course of the conflict in Assad's favor. The regime's Russian-backed assault on Idlib, the last remaining opposition stronghold, again threatens to place Russian and Turkish-backed forces on different sides of the battlefield. Turkey and Russia have come together to seek a diplomatic end to Syria's war through the Astana peace process. But are their strategic goals too divergent to produce results? And could these differences eventually sour the Russo-Turkish relationship? Adam Pletz, The Newsmakers.
Joining us now from the Turkish city of Gaziantep is Murat Aslan. He has held several positions within the Turkish armed forces. Murat is now a security researcher at the SETA Foundation think tank. In Moscow, we have the former Russian diplomat Viacheslav Matuzov, and Sami Hamdi is in London for us. Sami is editor-in-chief of the online current affairs magazine, The International Interest. Gentlemen, all three of you, thank you so much indeed for your time. Obviously, gas has brought Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan together, but let's concentrate on their differences, starting with Syria. Sami, as far as that northwestern province of Idlib in Syria is concerned, many people have been asking for months now whether all of the activity in the bombing from the Russians and from the regime is just a prelude to a final full-out assault, which, if Bashar al-Assad were to reclaim Idlib, would mean that he would have reunified the country under his control for the first time since the war began now, almost 10 years ago. Do you think that full-out assault is coming?
I don't think a final assault is coming yet. I think one of the main issues with regards to Idlib, and the reason why Turkey has been so heavily invested in Idlib and backing the Syrian opposition forces, is because over the years, the whole international community, all of the powers that are involved in Syria, ignored Turkey's concerns over the security of its border, ignored Turkey's concerns over the influx of refugees, and ignored Turkey's concerns about the expansion of the armed Kurdish groups, the PKK and the YPG. Therefore, Turkey quite simply does not trust anybody, and it threw itself into the Syrian conflict in order, one, to protect its border, but two, to have a stake in a country whereby if it does not have a stake, it will burn Turkey just as much as it has burnt itself. And Idlib is a power card for Turkey because the factions that are fighting Assad in Idlib wholeheartedly have thrown themselves in the arms of Turkey. Turkey has supplied the logistics. Turkey has supplied military training. Turkey is the country that has allowed them to continue to survive in the midst of an Assad onslaught that has allowed him to retake most of the country. For the Russians, it's a bit more complicated. Russia is happy that suddenly there is a member of NATO that is developing warmer relations with Moscow at the expense of NATO allies. It's the first time since the beginning of NATO that we see the NATO allies so much differentiating with one another. And Russia does not want to throw that away. Russia believes that if it plays its cards right, it could actually have a long-term ally in Turkey. Unfortunately for Moscow, however, it backs different sides. But when it comes to Idlib, Assad wants to retake the city. It's the Russians who are telling Assad, wait, let me talk to Turkey. Wait, I don't want to put Erdogan in a corner yet. I don't want to put the Turks in a corner yet. Turkey now has its safe zone in Syria. Turkey now has a place to resettle the refugees. The armed Kurdish groups no longer pose the threat that they once did. Putin will say to Erdogan, look, you have your safe zone, you have a place to put the refugees, the Kurds are no longer, the armed Kurdish groups, the YPG, PKK, are no longer a threat, give me Idlib. Erdogan will say, look, you guys are still involved in Libya, you're backing Haftar, you're causing me problems in Libya. Let's see if there's a potential for either a trade-off or a discussion with regards to these. I think there is a wrestling match taking place between Putin and Erdogan. Putin is trying to squeeze Erdogan for everything possible before he agrees to anything on Syria or Libya.
Let me just bring you some figures which pertain to 2019, and they come from the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Vyacheslav, I'm going to ask you a question off the back of these, so just listen to some of these figures, okay? 3,364 civilians were killed in 2019, most by Russian-backed forces. 871 vital civilian facilities were hit. They include 215 schools, 98 medical facilities, 197 places of worship. Again, most of those attacks, like the number of civilians killed, those attacks carried out by Russian-backed forces. That means the regime and or Russia. Last month alone, in December alone, 453 barrel bombs were dropped by Russian-backed forces. Vyacheslav, how are Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin supposed to resolve their differences over Idlib province when Vladimir Putin says, yes, there will be peace there, and then he starts bombing civilians?
Well, then the figures may be correct. Nobody reject all these statistics. But I can remind you one important thing. Syria was a prosperous country before 211. Why it was undergone to this punishment? They say that this till now, something about 100,000 of foreigners, weapon, ammunition came to Syria. For what purpose? For destroying Syrian government? Who was behind those forces that came from all over the world? Some of them came from China, Uyghur. Some of them came from Russia, from Caucasus division, for example, that right now located in Idlib. Somebody from Arab countries, from North Africa, from Europe, from United States. So, who began this punishment of Syrian state? And all are blaming Syrian government and Russia. I cannot agree with this approach. First of all, because it is all victims of this war. It's really victim. But victim is the country at the same time. Who begin? Even Donald Trump, one of his speeches before election or after election be elected, mentioned the fact that Daesh, that Islamic State, was created by previous American administration, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, who arranged all this coup d'etat in Syria.
Yeah, okay,
Israel
Viacheslav,
in the south
Viacheslav,
and Islamic State in the north.
Okay, Viacheslav, I'm definitely not going to disagree with you. I'm definitely not going to disagree with you that there are terrorists in Idlib. There is Al-Nusra Front, there is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, you've already talked about Daesh. But honestly, are you saying because terrorist groups exist, it's fair enough to kill thousands of civilians? We all remember Eastern Ghouta and Aleppo, where the tactic seemed to be, by the regime and by Russia, kill so many civilians through bombing that all opposition groups will have to hold their hands up and say, we will leave because we can't let you kill every single human being here.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir. So two forces split it in Syria. 100,000 of foreign fighters with weapon, modern weapon, even anti-tank rockets provided by the United States to them to fight and to overthrow existing regime, existing government, member of United Nations organization. I ask, who is responsible for that? I don't agree with this, absolutely, because it is the subject of studying, and I think that should be registered. Who now in Idlib? In Idlib now, Uyghur, Caucasus regiment or Caucasus division. It is foreigners. And the problem is big, but the problem is what to deal with those people who came to Idlib from all over Syria, from other places.
Sure.
And I can say that this Idlib situation is really serious. Russia and Syrian government gave 17 months to solve this problem peacefully, because Turkey and Russia in Sochi, Putin and Erdogan agreed on main principles to respect sovereignty of Syrian state and Syrian territory. So, if this sovereignty is not respected, how can we wait anything else?
Okay, let's put the question to Murat Aslan. Murat, so how does Recep Tayyip Erdogan go about dealing with Vladimir Putin when pretty much the regime will do almost anything, it seems, that Vladimir Putin says? And as Sami Hamdi said, at the moment, it does seem to be as if Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the one who is really the most important person in stopping a full-out assault by the regime on Idlib province, because, as Sami says, the Russians don't want to put Erdogan in a difficult position right now.
I think accusing any party in Syria is the most easiest way. But we should first focus on Turkish-Russian relations. It's in a good mood. That's reality. But on the other hand, there are some impediments. And first test case for Turkish-Russian relations is Syria, and the second one is Idlib, specifically for Syrian case. In Idlib, there's a humanitarian disaster right now, because if you take the international law on war, either 1949 convention, or if you go even to 1907 convention or 1899 convention, it is strictly forbidden to bomb civilian people and also urban areas. And currently we see helicopters flying over Idlib, bombing day by day and killing many more than expected. And now we have almost 300,000 immigrants very close to Turkish border. What President Erdogan is focused actually to prevent a humanitarian disaster. So there must be a way to prevent this disaster, and we have tools actually. The first one is the Sochi agreement, as my Russian friend claims. Then we have to obey what was agreed on it, which means there are observation posts, 20 kilometers of demilitarized zone, and everybody must respect the safety of the other. That's it. But if you come to the current situation, regime bombs, attacks, and employ operations over there. So these people in Idlib will react, including the ones who are legitimate opposition, Syrian National Army, and also the radicalized actors. So if you want to prevent these actors, then first obey the rules that is agreed on the table. And later then you can discuss the future of Idlib on table, not on the battleground, because civilians suffer right now from by starving and also losing their lives. This is much more important than regimes or Russia's interests to secure Hama, Aleppo, or Latakia. First human and later than battleground.
Okay, listen, just 1 minute from you, Sami, if you don't mind, and then we're going to move on to Libya. How key is Idlib to finding a final peaceful solution to the war in Syria, which I believe in March is going to enter its 10th year? Just briefly, if you can.
Even if they solve Idlib, it doesn't bring peace to Syria. You still have the issue of Assad, who has lost his moral legitimacy to rule Syria. You still have Turkey in the safe zone in the north that will be outside of Assad's control. You still have the US in the Kurdish areas. Assad has no control over that. You have infrastructure that's been destroyed. You have a country that's been destroyed. You have disgruntled people. You have refugees who don't want to go back to those destructed areas. Many will probably go into Turkey's safe zone. Turkey will come under pressure in that safe zone. We'll see there'll be a wrangling in Damascus itself between the different political factions to take advantage of Assad's weakness. Russia will come across a problem of how to finance Syria's reconstruction. If it relies on the Gulf, that's inviting the US in once more. If it brings China in, it might not be able to control China later. I know we're talking about Idlib like it is the last gateway to peace, but on the contrary, if after Idlib is solved, we still have many, many issues to deal with in Syria.
Okay, so let's talk about Libya, both countries on opposing sides, and possibly even more so, if that is even a reality, than in Syria. Murat, you were in Libya just about a week ago. 35 Turkish soldiers confirmed by President Erdogan have now arrived there. More are going. Do you think the Turkish president is going to change the fighting in favor of the UN-recognized government of Fayez al-Sarraj, which at the moment appears to be on the back foot as it faces Khalifa Haftar's illegal militia?
There's a great expectation in Libya because they are expecting Turkey to stop the current turbulence. Because we know that in Libya there is a kind of factor, Khalifa Haftar, which is a dynamic of Eastern energy, interests of the West, as a project after Sisi. And this project first negotiated constitution, shaked the hand of the government of national accord in United Arab Emirates, participated to a conference in Italy, and later then changed his mind and attacked. And now the people in Tripoli mainly is expecting a force, an outer hand to stabilize and balance the region. And Turkey is the only actor that gives a hand. The other ones are hesitating or just providing support to Haftar. Imagine that even the great powers like the United States or Italy are preferring to wait and see strategy, and once a side is claiming a victory, they will support it. That's not fair. There is a legitimate government over there, and Turkey supports it, and it is first for the benefit of Turkey because of Eastern Mediterranean. The second, historical and cultural interaction of both communities require Turkey to be in Libya to assist Libyans against a coup d'etat attempt. That's the overall statement that you can hear in Turkey.
Viacheslav, people around the world scratching their heads wondering what Russia's interest is in Libya. Can you explain it to us?
Well, Russia has no commercial, economical interest in Libya. No. Why? Because Russia have its own gas, its own oil, and Libya, the main resources, it's oil and gas. So, what is the interest for Russia in Libya is stability in this country. Very important country in North Africa, close to Europe, and if we after some years, found ourselves before the fact that all those terrorist groups that were now beaten in Idlib or in Syria will be relocated to Libya. And instead of Islamic State in Syria, we can receive another stand in Libya, because we have natural resources close to Europe. It will be disaster for all over the world. That's why Russia pay attention to inter-Libyan regulation. Russia doesn't intervene. All our fake news we hear here last months, that Russian Wagner troops are now helping Haftar. Haftar is a national Libyan army who replaced for this position by Libyan parliament. The only single body, ruling body in Libya that elected by population. Government of national accord is not appointed by government, by parliament. They refuse to agree with the staff of this government. They agree with the president of Fayez Sarraj, but they don't agree with the staff. He was trying to create a government from those who represent Islamic State.
Okay, so that's the Russian position. Okay,
we agreed that Fayez Sarraj is acknowledged, but he is acknowledged in the world, but it is not acknowledged inside Libya.
Okay,
because he needs
Vyacheslav, we have to move on.
Agree for his existence from parliament.
Okay, thank you very much for explaining Russia's interest in Libya, but we knew you were going to say it's fake news that there are Russian mercenaries in the country, because Vladimir Putin said it a few days ago. Sami, set the record straight as a neutral here, okay? Because Vyacheslav has already mentioned the private military organization, the Wagner Group. Reuters, just 24 hours ago, saying that there's a medical facility, a private medical facility in St. Petersburg that has for years been treating Russian mercenaries who have been injured while fighting in Syria and in Libya. And they've really done their investigation quite thoroughly. I won't go through all the evidence that they have, but they've established that the Sogaz International Medical Center there in St. Petersburg is treating Russian mercenaries. Are the Russians justified in saying that they're fighting terrorists while supporting Khalifa Haftar? Bearing in mind that the Russians say that's fake news, but we've heard that phrase so many times before.
I think the terrorism card is used by everybody. You have to remember, Russia is not the only country in Libya. You have France, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Italy, US, Saudi Arabia. You have all these countries that are involved in Libya today, and everybody is trying to get a slice of the cake. Moreover, anybody who looks at Russia's foreign policy in the Mediterranean and towards Europe will see that there's a growing antagonism. Russia has been empowering Balkan states to resist EU pressure over the accession process for these countries to join the EU. Russia has been seeking a route to the Mediterranean. It's why it has its Tartus military base in Syria, and why it is working so closely with Erdogan on this pipeline in order to get an access to the Mediterranean. But I don't think Russia wants to see Haftar take over Libya. I think Russia, as in Syria, is showcasing its power, showcasing its advanced weaponry, saying to the world, I am the alternative to the US. Don't go to Washington, come to Moscow. Look at Syria, how they don't debate in Geneva or in Washington anymore. Everybody's coming to Astana, coming to me, and now me and the Iranians and the Turks are solving Syria without the need for the United States and Europe. Libyans, you don't need to go to Washington. Don't go to the EU who abandoned you. Come to me and come to Moscow and come to Astana. Come to a place that I designate. I will put hand in hand with Erdogan, and we can be the power brokers in Libya. And I think the proof of that, the EU fear that, is that this Berlin conference, the way in which Angela Merkel suddenly came to life, suddenly called France, called Italy, suddenly got them together and said, guys, we're about to lose Libya. It's about to go into the hands of the Turks and the Russians, and they will be the ones to decide the future of Libya.
Okay, we're running out of time, Sami.
Algeria. The point is this: Russia wants to be a power broker. It wants to fill in that US vacuum, and that's what it's doing in Libya today, showcasing force and telling people, come to Moscow.
Sami, thank you so much indeed. Vyacheslav and Murat, that's been the Newsmakers. And to you, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.